Alrighty, here's my audience. Yeah, you guys are on now. And the rest of my audience is viewing online. So I'm going to tell you a story about a guy named George Maskey. He's a captain in the Army Reserves. Now, George decided to be an FBI special agent. He passed all of his tests with flying colors. And then he had to take a polygraph test. In one testing procedure, George went from an upstanding citizen who served his country with pride and honor to a deceitful spy who was blacklisted, all because a tester determined he lied during the polygraph test. Hi, my name is John Crook, and today I'm going to educate you a little bit on the polygraph test, kind of what it is, the history of it, and how it's used today. So we'll start today basically what it is. The polygraph machine is a testing procedure to determine if an individual is telling the truth. Basically, the polygraph machine measures the physiological data from an individual's respiratory, cardiovascular, and sweat gland systems. Now, the actual definition of polygraph, it literally means many writings, and that's just in regards to the many amounts of data that it does record. So how does it work? So basically, a person is hooked up to the machine, and the tester asks a series of questions. Basically, then they start off with some baseline questions just to register to see how you're telling the truth, how you answer, how you respond to a question. So they're real basic, from like what's your name, what's your sex, family questions, work questions, and they kind of get into the hardball questions. And at that point is when they kind of word the questions and to kind of get the answers that they want. Now, once they're done with the testing procedure, the interviewer goes back and he analyzes the results and looks for irregularities in how you answer the questions. Now, what are these regularities? So we mentioned the three of them. The first is the respiratory, and basically that alleges that a change in the breathing pattern of a person can tell if they're being truthful. So if they basically measure the ratio of how you're breathing, and if that changes, allegedly if you're being dishonest, it's going to change. Secondly, they test for the sweat glands, and basically, same thing, if someone's nervous, they're going to start sweating more, and by sweating more when you answer a question, they allege that means that you're being dishonest. And lastly, we have the cardiovascular, and that's measuring a person's blood pressure and heart rate. And along the same lines of being nervous, allegedly your blood pressure is going to start to raise, your heart's going to start to pump, and they're going to tell if you're lying. So now that we kind of know what it is, let's take a look at the history of the polygraph. We started noticing changes in a person's physiology, that they were not being truthful as early as the 1800s. An Italian criminologist named Lombroso first saw a change in someone's blood pressure and heart rate when they were being dishonest. And in the 1910s, there were studies you could observe the breathing patterns and see the differences when a person was lying. So the actual first test was in 1921. An individual by the name of John Larson, who worked at the Berkeley Police Department, developed the first polygraph test. And this only included the findings of Lombroso regarding the blood pressure and heart rate, and then some further research on the breathing ratios. Now, it's important to point out that this test was not used to monitor the criminal activity, but rather the honesty of the police force on hand. Later in 1923, it was an individual by the name of Leonard A. Keeler who developed the sweat gland testing. And it was thought that this third method would increase the accuracy of the testing. Now, it's interesting that although that last method was added in 1923, and there have been great technological advances on how they do the testing procedure is fundamentally the same. That they're testing your blood pressure, sweat glands, and breathing patterns like they did in 1920. They're doing the exact same thing today, just a little bit fancier testing procedures. So that leads to the question, is it even accurate? And the proponents of the tests, they would say it's about 90% accurate, while the detractors would put the number at about 70%. So regardless, it's not a 100% accurate test. And according to the American Psychological Association, quote, most psychologists agree that there is little evidence that polygraph tests can accurately detect lies. And it's not even admissible as evidence in the court of law. So we do still see this used today. It's actually pretty prevalent in the government. They use it in many of their agencies, from the CIA, FBI, NSA, whether it's in the hiring procedure or individuals who are already hired. They basically test to see if you're being honest, if you're a spy. And we also see this used in the private sector as well. Businesses use it for employees as well as new hires. And it really is a bad for company employee morale. So according to an individual named Russell Tice, an NSA whistleblower, quote, the NSA routinely uses polygraphs to terrorize the rank and file members or file employees and uses the info to blackmail them into participating in illegal and unethical conduct. And our good friend George Maskey, who runs the website antipolygraph.org, says the polygraph is intended to be a physiological tool of coercion. And this is also a test that can be beat. Our same whistleblower friend went to the press in 2012 and said that it is easy to beat and the test really isn't up to par. So in conclusion, we kind of went over the basics of what a polygraph test is, some of the history of it, and kind of how it's used today. And as we see today, that it really isn't a viable testing procedure. It's seen that it isn't 100% accurate, and it's not even used in the court of law. So I think Sharon Stone in the movie Basic Instinct sums it up best when she says, if I was guilty and wanted to beat that machine, it wouldn't be hard. Thank you for your time. All right. Thank you.